Hi folks, Florida Man here. Today, I bring you an after-action report on a game I played on the classic map on PlayDiplomacy.com. The game was called Anonymous 7, and I took over a surrendered position. So, as I typically do with these games, I will go over what happened prior to my joining, and then I will discuss how I behaved after I took over. In spring 1901, we see England and Germany both making potentially anti-Russian openings, while France makes an opening that appears optimized for getting him the maximum builds possible. Italy makes a very aggressive opening to Tyrolia and Venice, while Austria defends himself against a Russian move into Galicia and holds Trieste in place, already looking very besieged. Turkey surprisingly lets Russia into the Black Sea, which was a sign of either a close alignment between the two easternmost powers, or a Turkey that was just about ready to be put in the oven. In fall, Turkey failed to enter any orders, so the latter, and Russia moved his fleet into Romania while supporting himself into Galicia, which feels aggressive to both Austria and Turkey, depending on the builds. Austria countered an Italian attack, not the last one that he was going to see, on Trieste, while England and France bounced in Belgium, and Germany supported himself into Holland. That, plus the fact that England convoyed into Norway while Germany did not bounce Russia out of Sweden, disproves the idea we might have gotten from spring moves that England and Germany were working closely together. In the builds, Germany and France each get a fleet and an army, while England failed to enter builds, all of which is very bad for England. To make matters worse, Russia got a St. Petersburg North Coast fleet. Elsewhere, Austria got a new army, while Russia made the rather confusing choice of a Moscow army, and Italy obtained a new fleet. In spring 1902, the English moves were all highly defensive, and they appeared to temporarily prevent any advances into English territory, but it was visibly only a matter of time before those defenses seemed as if they would falter. On the other hand, rather than attacking England, Germany went after Sweden with his positioning this season. Italy continued to go after Austria, Russia focused north without doing much of anything in the eastern theater, and Turkey failed to move. After this failure to enter orders, by the way, the Turkish player auto-surrendered, and a new player joined. It was not me, so this is not when I joined the game. However, we do see this season as something of a turning point, as with the fall, Turkey positions to go for Greece, Russia moves into the Black Sea and puts his armies in Galicia and Romania, while Austria retakes Trieste from Italy. In the west, the season is even more dramatic, as France attacks England, but Germany simultaneously attacks France and Russia, seemingly breaking up what had looked like a somewhat friendly relationship with the French, and making both of his non-English neighbors into enemies at once. A bold strategy. We'll see how it pays off for him. In the retreats, we see Russia maintain his focus on the north by keeping his fleet, even though it's now in Skagerrak, rather than rebuilding something that might be more advantageous in the east. With the builds, all three of the Western powers get armies for their ongoing war amongst themselves. Turkey gets the fleet that the previous Turkish player had neglected to build, and Russia does destroy the Skagerrak fleet after all, which I think was a sensible decision. Can't invest overly much in the north and the west, as Russia early on, unless you're very confident about what's happening in the east. In spring 1903, we see Germany continue to progress against France, with England joining in the attack, while Russia continues maneuvering to try and attack Norway and get his little piece of Scandinavia. Down south, Italy pours more units into surrounding and taking Trieste, while Turkey takes the undefended and unopposed, uncontested Greek neutral, and Russia unsuccessfully attempts to advance into Austria without having invested any additional units in the fight. Since Austria is surrounded, his fate, nevertheless, appears sealed. In fall 1903, though, Russia makes a rather bold and shocking move, convoying out of Romania into the Turkish home center of Ankara. Flipping allegiances, this move gives Russia extra fuel, and Austria an unexpected second wind. Russia also moves out of St. Pete, allowing himself the option of building another unit there, and he moves Barents Sea west into Norwegian Sea. A very aggressive anti-English move, and I would add this whole sequence of Russian moves is a fair bit gutsier than most Russian players would be willing to try. I think this is how Russia ought to be played, though. A conservative style of play doesn't suit the country nearly as well as the kind of grasp for domination that we see here. Out west, we see this year as basically a mulligan for the Anglo-German alliance, since there is no forward progress against France, with Germany losing the only centre he gained, Belgium. France is also poised to hold out against an English naval attack indefinitely. Down south, Italy again fails at taking Trieste. In the build phase, Germany gets another fleet, while Russia gets a Warsaw army. I think this frankly makes Germany unbalanced no matter who he wanted to fight, while the Warsaw army provides some badly needed security to Russia's position in his homeland. In spring 1904, Russia continues this aggressive style of play, moving to North Sea, St. Pete, and Silesia in a big, dramatic attack on the Anglo-German alliance. England is making very conservative plays in defense against the possibility of a Russian attack on Edinburgh, which are not necessarily bad moves, but might ultimately lead to giving up more ground in the long run than some perhaps riskier plays. Still, England is positioned so he's at least a hard nut to crack. France and Germany are in a standoff that Russia is suddenly very well positioned to break, thanks to Germany's bad build decision. In the east, Russia continues to run wild in Turkey while Italy continues to slam his head against the Austrian wall, only for France to now have a unit knocking at the Italian door. In fall, England continues his extremely conservative defense, although no one actually bothers to attack him, while Russia and France force Germany into a guessing game with no possibility of winning, resulting in Russia capturing Holland from Germany. Germany makes bad choices all around, as he also retreats from the Baltic Sea instead of positioning forward to attack St. Petersburg. The only good call Germany made this year was bouncing France out of the North Sea here. Looking east, Austria and Italy remain deadlocked, which is probably exactly what Russia wants, while Russia invades Turkey further, leaving him with only one of his home centers remaining. Italy moves a single fleet west to harass France in response to France's unit in Piedmont, which I think is frankly getting off quite lightly for France, at least in the short run. In the retreats, Turkey makes a game-altering mistake by trying to retreat to Bulgaria, where he and Austria just had a bounce, resulting in the destruction of a critical Turkish fleet that he can now no longer rebuild. In the builds, only Russia emerges with new units, constructing 2 new armies. In spring 1905, that Italian unit that moved west enters the western Mediterranean because France seemingly ignored the option of bouncing it. Italy again fails at attacking Austria, while Russia unstoppably invades Turkey, and at the same time moves another unit toward Germany, who fails to enter orders here. England takes St. Pete, but can't hold it unless Russia forgets to take it back, or England and Germany coordinate and outguess Russia. The only bright spot for England is that he keeps Russia out of North Sea with a bounce this season. Russia in North Sea would, I think, be really fatal right now. In fall 1905, England does one better by actually taking the North Sea himself, making his position exponentially harder to attack than it would be with a French or Russian unit there. Russia naturally retakes St. Petersburg, though. France is basically in a holding position, since he needs one fleet to bounce with Italy, and his other units aren't moving forward either. He supports Germany holding in place against Russia, which is an interesting shift, but Germany still doesn't enter orders here. Looking east, Russia and Austria worked together to finish Turkey off, which allowed Italy to finally take Trieste. I hope it was worth it, buddy. 5 years, and that's the only thing you've gained besides Tunis in this game. Anyway, after this failure to enter orders, the German player auto-surrendered, and I took over the German position. Great. I'm surrounded, and for some reason I have more fleets than armies. Frankly, this is one of the worst positions I've ever inherited, but I tell myself I'll make the best of it. Unfortunately, with the builds, Russia gets another new unit in Warsaw, clearly intending to throw more fuel on the fire that's burning Germany down already. I can hardly blame him. The German centers are exactly the ones he needs to secure the win here if he's smart. I can only hope that France and England and I will be smarter. In spring 1906, I'm trying to set up a defensive wall to hold a line against Russia for the long term and hopefully push him back. The only advantage to all my fleets is that they can potentially punish Russian aggression in the medium term, by either allowing me to push him backward out of Prussia, and by extension the other spaces around me, or by helping me in England to kick him out of St. Petersburg, which would be quite gratifying. Diplomatically, I'm basically just working on securing support from both the English and the French. Unfortunately, Berlin is probably unsalvageable from this position, thanks to France helping Russia get Holland earlier. Elsewhere, Italy gets kicked out of Trieste, which I think is exactly what he deserves for pursuing this one simple goal for the entire game thus far, and seemingly forcing Austria into Russia's arms. This season does see Russia walk into Greece, which makes one question what the exact nature is of that Russian-Austrian partnership, and whether Austria will be transferring centers to Russia to help Russia become even more overwhelmingly powerful. In fall 1906, someone in the public press started anonymously commenting about the fact that I, the great Florida man, was the person who had joined. It was a little annoying and a little childish, since it seemed intended only to undermine my position as I sought to bring about a German recovery from my present besieged position. The comments in the public press were ultimately not a big problem, though, I don't think. What was a big problem was the sheer weakness of the German position when I inherited it. This season, as with last season, it was just me, working with France and England against Russia. I lost Berlin due to the weakness of the German position from the moment I started, but thanks to French support, I took Holland from Russia, destroying that fleet that was behind our lines, and we also kept Russia out of Munich. I also moved Sweden down to Denmark. If I recall correctly, I did that either because England was suspiciously quiet, or because he overtly mentioned something about the idea of transferring Denmark to him, albeit perhaps with some fig leaf about it being temporary so we could destroy one of my fleets or something like that. Either way, I believe I somewhat expected this to bounce, and it was ultimately unfortunate that it did not. I spend a lot of time when I play diplomacy trying to anticipate my opponent's moves, and there are times when I feel almost as though I have a sixth sense for possible betrayal. But these instances where I think I sense a betrayal coming and I'm wrong or I have the timing off can be just as damaging as not sensing a backstab coming at all. In the builds, Russia gets yet another army. A bit unnecessary at this point, dude. Embarrassingly, in the season of spring 1907, I failed to enter orders. We don't lose any more ground to Russia as a result of this, but France does dislodge me from Ruhr. This was not a bad result because I retreat to Munich, although we are experiencing some very bad results elsewhere because Austria and Russia are quickly conquering Italy, who failed to enter orders much more consequentially. Italy did enter orders to retreat to Tuscany, but in the fall he failed to enter orders again, which is a shame because he and France could have taken Venice back from the Austro-Russian coalition. Unfortunately, although France is still theoretically fighting the Austrians, he works with the Russians here to backstab me and take Munich, which anyone could tell him is a very bad move unless it was with my consent, which it wasn't. If I had to describe a single moment that lost the game, it might be this one, although perhaps I should blame myself for failing to move in spring, and thereby perhaps losing the French confidence. In any case, it's all downhill from here. In spring 1908, France continues eating me up, although England continues to defend me against Russia, and France also moves aggressively in the directions of both the Mediterranean in general and Austria in particular, presumably believing that Russia will be his partner there. Italy continues to fail to move, while Austria moves to finish Italy off. After this latest failure to move, the Italian player auto-surrendered, and a new player joined. In fall 1908, Russia betrays both his French, and presumably his Austrian, ally, by helping me attack France and retake Munich and Holland, while taking Serbia from Austria. France is imploding here due to a combination of technical mistakes and strategic overreach. He fails to move to the Mediterranean this season because his move attempt was Portugal to Western Mediterranean, which is not a legal move, and he had no friends left, so he's not in a very good position to survive being backstabbed by Russia. Ironically, despite having also attacked or betrayed every power, Russia has a much greater influence with the other players at this point than France. With the build phase, only Russia gets to build, and he gets a St. Pete North Coast fleet, clearly aiming to finish things off. In spring 1909, with France having failed to negotiate with me in a constructive way, following my recapture of one of my home centers from him, I start janissarying for Russia. He's promising to leave me alive in a few centers, and he's also offering support to recapture Kiel. and it's better than anything anyone else is saying, so I throw my hands up and start helping the evil board leader on his quest for solo. Also in spring 1909, the very recently joined Italian player auto-surrendered, and another new player joined. In the retreats phase, France retreated to Ruhr, so he could have started supporting me in my remaining home centers, and worked with me to make a wall against Russia. You know, if he wanted to. In fall, though, we see that did not happen. Instead, he takes Holland from me while I continue helping Russia. To Russia's credit, he's doing a better job of keeping his word than France right now, including self-bouncing in Munich to keep it from falling into French hands. He's also doing a bang-up job of fighting France in the Mediterranean, despite that naturally being a naval battle. This is a bit of a weird game. Going to spring 1910, Russia gets somewhat outmaneuvered in the fight to keep hold of Tunis, but he's also in a position now for both attacks on England and for a stab into both Austria and me that will carry him quite close to the finish line. In fall, we see Russia take virtually every single center it was possible for him to take, stabbing both me and Austria as well as taking Liverpool for the win. He gained a net 6 centers, counting the loss of Tunis against him, to reach 20 in the final season. This is the final position of the board, and I must say, I'm somewhat envious of such a beautiful finish as Russia. I've had games like this where I was the Russian player, and you always want to be the one it's happening for rather than the one it's happening to, but one thing is for sure, a solo victory is a beautiful thing. I hope you guys enjoyed this diplomacy commentary, and I look forward to your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you'll show it with a like and by joining the roughly half of my viewers who are subscribed. And I also support putting your hands together for the thoughtful and generous people whose names now appear on screen, our wonderful patrons and translators. You too can join the Alligator Army by clicking the link to join my Patreon in the video description to get access to a world of exclusive Diplomacy Podcast episodes and occasional videos accessible only through my Patreon, as well as early access to all YouTube content. I'd buy that for $1. Till next time, Florida Man, out.